Welcome to Flow into Alignment. Today I'm going to walk you through 10 beginner yoga poses that you need to know. And this is for those who are beginners and have been wondering what yoga poses are in the beginning category. Come along, join me, and find out. You also get to be joined today by my cat, Thea. She likes to join me sometimes in these yoga videos. The first yoga pose I want to go over is actually an introductory pose. So I call it pose 0.5. So half pose, or like not really the first pose technically, but usually you always want to start off your practice with breathing. And you'll usually start in a seated pose, or sometimes you'll start in child's pose. When I teach, I usually start in seated. A lot of people tend to be more comfortable in seated pose. So when you start your practice with breathing, you're also starting your practice bringing your concentration into the moment, taking your thoughts and all of the things you're thinking about and calming them down and just focusing on what you want to do in the next moments with your yoga practice. You'll also take the time to think about your breathing and concentrate on your breathing and taking those deep breaths. In life, we tend to do shallow breaths. And so taking the time to breathe deeply is so amazingly beneficial to not only your body, but also your mind. Especially if you find yourself getting tired later in the afternoon, take that moment to come into a seated, comfortable seated position and take deep breaths. And you'll find bringing that oxygen to the brain is so good to help you wake up. So since I mentioned child's pose, let's look at child's pose as well. So this is a seated pose. You can do it with your legs crossed or your legs straight out in front of you. You can also put a block underneath your hips as well, and you can sit on a block. So let's look at child's pose. So you would come into child's pose with your knees wide. So this would be considered wide leg child's pose or extended child's pose. Feet together, knees out wide, and then you would extend the arms out and you would lower the head down straight to the ground, or you can grab a block and put a block underneath your head if your head cannot touch the ground. You can also put a bolster or a block underneath your chest so that your chest ends up being slightly higher than your hips and allowing the hips to drop down towards your heels, relaxing and releasing your hips and your lower back. So this is great if you have the mobility for this position, that your hips can almost touch your heels or touch your heels, and if you have a tendency to have tight hips and lower back. The next pose, so technically to me this is pose number 1 for beginner pose, but I guess we could say that your child's pose was pose number 1. So we'll go to pose number 2. So we'll end up probably covering 11 poses today instead of 10. So the next pose is tabletop. So what you would do is you would come into tabletop with your hands mat width and your knees 4 to 6 inches apart. Why do your hands need to be wide? It feels like your hands are wider than your shoulders. What that will do is it'll create space for the shoulders to be away from the neck, so you don't end up tightening the muscles between your shoulder and your neck, and you create some space there. So that's why you want your hands mat width. And I also recommend that you point your fingers slightly to the corner so they're not straight ahead. What that will look like from the front is, instead of the fingertips facing straight forward, you're going to turn them out just slightly to the corner. So what people call external rotation. So that's where the hand positioning is. The knees are 4 to 6 inches apart from each other. And what that will allow is the knees to be straight underneath your hips. And then what you're going to do in tabletop is you're going to press the chest away from the floor, pressing your hands into the mat, and press your shins into the mat. And this will activate your core. And you can even just hold in tabletop for just getting some good core exercise. What if you can't get the wrist in a 90-degree angle? You're going to grab a foam wedge. It's not necessarily used for just yoga. So you're going to grab your wedge and place it about where your hands are. If you are going to have to use the wedge more frequently, I would recommend that you cut the wedge in half, because it does not open out as wide as you need it for your hands. But I'm just using this for demonstration purposes only. But ideally, you want the wedge to be hitting the edge of your mat. So you're going to place your hands on the wedge so that your hands end up coming into a less degree. Now, you'll see that as with the wedge on top of the mat, my hands are sliding down. So I always recommend that you slide the wedge under the mat. And that way you can get better traction and you have a less angle in the wrist and you take the pressure and the discomfort out of the wrist. The third yoga pose that is a beginner yoga pose is cat-cow, and that actually starts with tabletop. So you come into your tabletop position either with or without the foam wedge. Let me move my braid so it's out of the way from behind my neck. And you're going to start moving first into cow position, usually. Usually when you go through class, they'll usually lead you, or I will lead you into cow position first. On your inhale, you're going to lift your head, press your belly button towards your spine, press your shins into the ground, and then squeeze your shoulder blades towards the spine. And this is what the shoulder blades squeeze into the spine is what creates the arch in the back. And then for cat position, you're going to exhale and start with sliding the shoulder blades away from the spine, tucking the chin to the chest, tucking the tailbone towards the knees, pressing the belly button towards your spine, and pressing your spine up towards the ceiling. And then we can repeat that again. Inhale, lift the head, pressing belly button to the spine, pressing the shins into the ground, squeezing the shoulder blades towards the spine. That is cow. As you exhale, slide the shoulder blades away from the spine, tuck the chin to the chest, tuck the tailbone towards the knees, belly button to spine, and spine to ceiling. And then you can come back to your tabletop. This is a great foundational pose that will help you in other poses as you move through all of the rest of your beginning poses. Why? It's because you're learning how to have the shoulder blades squeezing towards the spine and then releasing away from the spine. So you're building that mobility in the shoulder blades of squeezing them in and away from the spine. You will see these movements in all the rest of your sun salutations. I always teach sun salutations because I love to use them as a way to warm up, and I find them extremely beneficial for me. Plus, it's really easy to remember sun salutations as a yoga flow. So I always like that because I like to know what I can take with me to travel, and sun salutations are easy. So you're going to find cow back and cat back popping up quite often in your sun salutations and even in a lot of the other yoga poses. The fourth beginner pose is Chaturanga. And Chaturanga is used a lot to help build strength in the upper body as well as the core. And Chaturanga, just really what it is, simply is something similar to a push-up. So I know Chaturanga sounds like an interesting word. That is just the Sanskrit word that is used for four-legged staff pose or four-limbed staff pose. I think that's the translation in English. Anyway, so we typically just use the Sanskrit word, Chaturanga, instead of four-limbed staff pose or something like that. Or, and two, if we would just say push-up, that you have a picture in your head of what push-up is, and that's not necessarily what Chaturanga is. So Chaturanga, what it is I usually typically like to start from tabletop or plank. But tabletop is an easy place to come from because you already have your hips in line with the ribs and your ribs in line with the shoulders. And that's how you want your plank to be and your Chaturanga to be. To move from tabletop to plank, you're going to tuck your toes and then you're going to stretch your legs out behind you. You do want to squeeze your legs towards each other and press your feet into the ground, tucking your tailbone towards your heels. You never want your tailbone lifted up. That's going to put too much pressure in the lower back. You want to activate the core, tuck the tailbone towards the heels. To do Chaturanga, what you would do is if you need to, you can drop the knees or you can keep the knees straight. You're going to take the weight forward. So you're going to slide your weight forward. And then as you exhale, bend the elbows and squeeze them in towards the body. And then you can come back up with your inhale. So my cat was in the way. Otherwise, I would show you too. For Chaturanga, you can sink all the way down to the ground where your chest is touching the ground. You don't have to hover in that Chaturanga position. Let's go over that one more time so you can see the positioning. The positioning of Chaturanga allows it to be where you're not putting as much pressure into the shoulder joint. So, and you're also supporting the elbow and wrist joint as well by activating the muscles of the core and the arms and the legs to make sure that all the weight is not reaching forward and that you're not slamming your head down on the ground. So again, you can start in that tabletop position, tuck the toes, go into plank, and then exhale, lean forward, elbows bend. You can hover or lower all the way down, and then you would move into your next position from there. The fifth beginner yoga position is downward facing dog. That again, you can start from a tabletop position. Tuck the toes, lift the heels up, walk the feet forward, lift the tailbone towards the ceiling, stretch the arms out long, make sure that the shoulder blades are away from the spine so it's more of a cat back. Tuck the chin towards the chest, and you can have straight legs or almost straight legs, or you can lift the heels up and bend the knees towards the chest. So you can try to keep the weight pulling and pushing back towards the heels and the hips, creating a long straight spine. And with this, you can also use your wedge underneath the hands as well, because for some, you are again putting a lot of pressure into the wrist. And same with Chaturanga as well. Anything where you're putting your hands on the ground and you have that 90-degree angle of the wrist, feel free to use the foam wedge if you need to. The sixth beginner pose is upward dog. That typically you move from Chaturanga or plank to go into upward dog. And so I'm going to show you from, if you came down from your Chaturanga, you would move from Chaturanga, from the hover position or from chest on the ground. You would lift your head and start coming into a cow back, so squeezing the shoulder blades towards the spine, pressing into the hands, stretching the arms out straight, reaching through the legs, taking a deep inhale, squeezing shoulder blades towards the spine, reaching your pubic bone down towards the ground or towards the top of your mat, pressing your feet into the mat, and you can keep looking straight forward or look slightly up. And then you would exhale to come out of it. And again, you can use wedges, the foam wedge underneath the wrist, because again, that is a 90-degree angle of the wrist, and it can be quite uncomfortable for the wrist if it's giving you discomfort. Now, if these positions seem really difficult and hard to do, don't you worry about that. I've got several videos on my channel that you can check out that show you how to use props like blocks and pillows and blankets and bolsters to help make these positions easier, especially for a beginner who's trying to get stronger and more flexible for these positions. And speaking of getting stronger and more flexible, check out the links below for the Flow into Alignment membership, because I teach you all of my tips and tricks that I have learned to get more stronger and more flexible. And I guarantee by this time next year, you are going to be amazed at how much stronger and flexible you are. So make sure to check out the links below to see the Flow into Alignment membership. The eighth yoga pose is flat back. What you would do with that one is you would come from your forward fold, and you would be in a catted back with forward fold. And then to come into flat back, you would make sure that your weight is forward so that your hips are in line with your ankles. You would take an inhale, and sorry, I had to sweep my head that way to make sure my braid swept to one side. So let me try that again. So your forward fold, cat back, and as you inhale, you're going to come into a cow back. So you're going to lift your head, belly button to spine, squeeze your glutes, press your feet into the ground. You may need to lift your hands and touch your legs. Squeeze your shoulder blades towards the spine, but instead of arching into the back like you do for cow, you're going to keep the back straight. So that you really got to press the belly button towards your spine for that, and gently tuck your tailbone towards the ground. Squeeze the shoulder blades towards the spine. And then to come out of it, you're going to exhale back down into forward folds. Let's try that one more time. Inhale, lift your head, squeeze your glutes, press your belly button towards your spine, squeeze your shoulder blades towards the spine, and then exhale, fold forward. The 9th beginner yoga position is Warrior One. And Warrior One, you can either step back into Warrior One, step forward into Warrior One from standing position, or you can step into it from a downward facing dog. I won't show you how to step into it from a downward facing dog because I have a video explaining how to do that and how to break that down and help you with that. So today I'm going to show you stepping back from standing at the top of your mat with your feet together, and you would step back into Warrior One. I'm going to take my right leg back. You can start with straight legs, and what that will do is it'll help you keep your hips in line. And I'm sure if you've seen my Instagram page, I kind of show you that, yes, your hips need to both be facing in the same direction in Warrior One. From here, you're going to press firmly into the back leg, engage your quadricep muscle, squeeze your inner thigh towards the center line. So that means it's going to roll that back thigh in towards the center for internal rotation. You're going to keep pressing that foot down into the ground and bend your front knee so that it lines up with the ankle. And how do you know if your front knee is lined up with your ankle? Because you can't see if it is. What helps me is if I cannot see my ankle at all, but I can still see the front of my foot, so the knuckles of my foot and my toes, then I know my knee is in correct position. If I can see my ankle, my knee is too far back. If I can only see some of my toes, my knee is too far forward. So I want to see all of my toes and the knuckles of my toes, so the knuckle joints of my toes, and then I know my knee's in line. From here, you're going to continue to squeeze your inner thighs together as if you have an exercise ball between your legs. You're going to use this hamstring muscle to gently pull the hips into position so that your tailbone is pointed directly down towards the ground. For some, you'll be able to point the toes outward into a 30-degree angle. That's what you want to eventually work towards, is the toes pointed outwards, but the thigh rotated inward. And that takes a lot of work. And I'm not always ready for it all the time. So that's why when I demonstrate, I point my toes straight ahead. But if you have the flexibility for that, great. I'm still working on it. So that's okay though, because we're all on a different journey, and that's wonderful. So going back to where we were, so you can either have the back toes outward in a slight angle or straight ahead, tailbone towards the ground, squeezing your inner thighs together. And then for the arms, you're going to come into a slight cow back. So your shoulder blades are towards the spine, and then you're going to lift the arms straight up. That is what creates the arch in the back. Not reaching back, not pressing forward with your belly, not sinking into the lower back. No, that's not what creates the arch in the spine. What creates the arch in the spine is a long spine, reaching the tailbone towards the ground, the top of the head towards the ceiling, and squeezing the shoulder blades towards the spine. And if you want, you can look straight up towards the ceiling, or you can keep the shoulder blades towards the spine, elongate the arms, press the hands together, and look up towards your thumbs. So that is Warrior One. The 10th yoga position is Warrior Two. And again, like I said from the beginning, because we added in child's pose into it, we're actually going to cover 11 beginner yoga poses. But this is number 10, and that's going to be Warrior Two. So Warrior Two, what it is if you're going to start from the top of your mat, you're going to step one foot back. I'm going to take my right foot again and step it back. My left toes are going to be facing where they were. My right toes are going to be facing the side of the mat. So you've got one leg and knee facing the front, and you've got one leg and knee facing the side. From here, what you're going to do to move into it, and you may need to keep walking that back foot further away, because a lot of times we have a lot more mobility and flexibility in the hips in this position, so you may need to take a wider stance. From here, again, we're going to make sure our back leg is nice and strong. We're going to press into the foot, not the blade of the foot, because that's going to stretch out the side of the ankle, which can end up hurting the ankle and the ligaments and tendons in the ankle. But instead, you're going to press the knuckle of the big toe into the ground, press your rest of the toes into the ground, including your baby toe. You're going to squeeze your inner thigh towards the center as if you have an exercise ball between both legs. And you're going to try to take this thigh and point it straight forward or rotate it out slightly. So we're external rotation in the back leg. Now from here, you're going to just slide everything forward to a bent knee. So you're not going to try to tilt anything. You're not going to try to tilt the hips. You're just going to keep them exactly where they are. Just slide everything forward to a bent knee. And that is warrior two positioning. For the front leg, again, you want to make sure that the knee is right over the ankle. I think my knee is a little bit further forward than the ankle. That's just because I know my body and I know what it looks like. So I'm going to walk my foot forward a little bit. Okay, so when you're looking down at your foot, for one, this to make sure that this knee is in correct position, so you're not putting this knee into a place where you can injure the joint of the knee. You want to make sure that you can see all three of your first three toes. You want to see the big toe, the middle toe, and the third toe. Then you know that this knee is not rolling forward. When the knee rolls inward and forward, you're going to put a lot of pressure on the inside of that knee, and you can end up tearing ligaments in the knee. You do not want to do that. This also makes sure that when you can see your first three toes, then you know your knee is over your ankle as well. This leg is also going to be an external rotation. What does that mean and how do you do it? You're going to imagine that you have a wall behind you and you're going to press your knee back against the wall. You can also take this hand and just roll that muscle, roll the quadricep, that thigh muscle out. You can do the same thing with this hand. Just grab onto those thighs, roll them out. Good. All right, from here, we got to make sure our hips are in line. So we want to take our weight back towards the back foot so that our hips have a straight line from one to the other. They're not tilted back. They're not tilted forward. We're a straight line. Tailbone is pointed directly down towards the ground. So that means you're going to activate the core, activate the inner thighs, and then the arms will reach up just slightly above where you feel your shoulders are. So you don't want them, sometimes this feels like shoulder height. It's not. This is shoulder height. You're going to squeeze the shoulder blades towards the spine and then reach your fingertips far away from each other. You're going to look towards the front of your mat. This is warrior two. The 11th and last beginner yoga pose I want to show you is reverse warrior. And as you can tell, all of these can kind of just stack on top of each other. And actually all these poses are part of your Sun Salutation A and B. And sometimes some people would consider it Sun Salutation C as well. So hey, you're learning Sun Salutation A and B all right here. This is great. Okay. So the last position is reverse warrior. I'm going to show that to you from the back because reverse warrior, there's a little bit of side bend and back bend involved in it. And so I want to show you what it looks like from the back. So let me show you first what the arms are going to do. So you're going to go from your warrior two arms. And I'm kind of here like this because this is how my hips look in my warrior two because I cannot get both of my hips to face the side. And that's okay. That's something we'll discuss later. Not in this video. It'll make it too long. So you're going to have the arms out. You're going to have the upper body in that warrior two position. The back arm is going to drop down. The front arm, you're going to point the palm up to the ceiling. Squeeze the shoulder blades towards the spine for cow back. Lift that front arm up and reach the chin up. You don't want to tilt the head into a weird position. So all you got to do is just take the chin from here and just reach it up towards the ceiling. And then you keep squeezing the shoulder blades towards the back, keep taking deep breaths, and you'll move into a back bend. So it really doesn't take, but when you're back bending, it's not happening here first. A lot of times that's what we assume. We assume it's happening from lower back first. That's what creates lower back pain. Instead, it's happening from the upper back. So remember your foundational pose of cow position and cat position, or cow back and cat back. We're going to take that cow back, lift the head, lift the head, belly button to spine, squeeze the shoulder blades towards the spine. We've already got a little bit of a back bend, and we keep working on it. We're going to keep our legs strong. Keep lifting the sternum towards the ceiling by squeezing the shoulder blades. Keep taking, as you take an inhale, open the ribs, allow more space. And slowly, you'll move into a back bend. Isn't that crazy? It's the craziest thing when I finally understood and realized how to do a back bend. Anyway, we'll talk about back bends in another video. Again, make it way too long. So let's go back into Warrior Two. Making sure you press firmly into the back foot. This thigh is rotating outward. This thigh is also rotating outward. You're taking your weight into the back foot to make sure the hips are in line. Knee is over the ankle. You can see your first 3 toes. Arms lift, shoulder blades gently squeeze to the spine. Moving into your reverse warrior, drop the back arm. Front palm up to the ceiling. You can start with a chin lift, or you can just do everything together by keeping your eye focus on the hand and lifting the head up with your eyes as you lift the arm up, squeezing the shoulder blades towards the spine. So this will feel different than when your legs are together, but that's okay. Keep squeezing the glutes, lifting the belly button towards the spine, reaching the spine long. Keep taking deep breaths, and slowly you'll move into a back bend. Then you'll exhale to come out of it, and then you can step up to the top of your mat. Those are all the beginner yoga poses that I wanted to show you. I know there's so many more poses that can be put into the beginner category, but these are the ones that I like to say are the beginner yoga poses because they make up Sun Salutations. And again, I love using the Sun Salutations to warm up and also learn how to move the body. So check out the rest of my videos as I describe the Sun Salutations, and also talk you through how to help you work through the Chaturanga, up dog, down dog, and make those adjustments that you need using the props. Thank you guys for joining me today. It was wonderful to have you, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.